to the lawlessness.
He's ashamed of our country. The VA, as I said earlier, was just a mess under the Obama-Biden administration.
How many police officers need to be assaulted in the streets of Portland by radical left mobs in order for Joe Biden to condemn this?
I don't understand how we have leaders who think that it's okay to tell us as parents that our kids can go and get an abortion without our consent, yet we have no right to keep them home from school. It's just, it's completely hypocritical.
Can't believe that he's calling these folks peaceful protesters.
Well, I think Joe Biden is totally on the wrong page on this, and he's completely out of step with where American women are when they talk about how to protect their families.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Black Voices for Trump Real Talk Online. I'm Katrina Pierson, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign, and tonight I'll be joined by the former Lieutenant Governor of Florida and first Black female elected statewide, Jennifer Carroll, and Senior Pastor of Hope Christian Church and Evangelical for Trump Coalition Advisory Board member, Bishop Harry Jackson. Thank you both for joining us this evening, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Before we begin, this week America lost one of her beloved patriots, Herman Cain. Herman was truly a personification of the American dream. In business, in politics, and his service to God, Herman led by his example and made a profound impact on both the conservative movement and our nation as a whole. As many of you know, Herman was a key advisor to our Black Voices for Trump Advisory Coalition, and he served as one of our co-chairs. He was also a dear friend to all of us, so we would be remiss if we did not honor his memory at the top of tonight's program. I met Herman Cain back in 2012, and he has been a solid voice for conservatism and the embodiment of the American dream since I've known him. I spoke to Herman while he was in the hospital and assured him that he and his family were in our thoughts, and also to call his phone carrier because President Trump had been trying to call and check on him, but his phone kept blocking restricted calls, and we all laughed once they finally connected. But he still had that classic Herman Cain fire in him for our country. We spoke again afterwards, and he asked me to make sure that President Trump kept up the fight to save our nation. So our hearts are heavy with the news of his passing. Herman is loved, and his laughter will truly be missed. God has a new warrior in heaven, and we are all blessed to have had him in our lives. Bishop, would you please lead us in a prayer for the Cain family and offer a moment in silence in remembrance of our beloved Herman Cain?
Thank you, Katrina. I want to pray from Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 2. Lord, I've heard your speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known. In wrath, remember mercy. Lord, this was a senior elder in the body of Christ as well as in politics. We ask that others will take his place. We also ask for the family that in this hour of grieving, that they'll take an emotional snapshot of what they remember most, the life lesson that Herman taught them. And Lord, we believe that his life is a shining example of what you can do, what you can become in the greatest country in the world. Now let's take a moment of silence to honor this great man. Amen.
Thank you so much, Bishop. I am honored to have called Herman a friend. He was a bright spirit, and his presence truly lit up the room, as you all know, and his devotion to our nation was inspiring. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share about Herman Cain?
Oh, absolutely. Herman Cain on a radio station. He came through Jacksonville loud and clear for 3 hours a day, and he had the saying, "Ah, shucky ducky now." And the folks in Jacksonville absolutely lit up with that. When I was the lieutenant governor, I emceed the Presidency 5, and I had to introduce the candidates running for president at that time. And Herman Cain showed Republicans how they should be campaigning, connecting with the people, resonating the message, and having a vision with the people. And when he lit up that room with his 999, all the other candidates looked at themselves as if, why am I even in this race? It was absolutely electrifying that after Herman Cain spoke, everybody else left. They're like, I don't need to hear anybody. But Herman had that infectious heart of giving. And as a businessman and a person in politics, he always wanted to give back and ensure that other people were empowered so they can take care of themselves and their families. And that's why Herman supported President Trump and supported the conservative agenda, because he knew that with the message and the messengers that we have on the conservative side, that people will be able to have the right policies put in place so that they can make generational wealth for themselves and their families.
Yeah, beautiful story. Bishop, I'm sure you have a personal story that you would also like to share.
I do. You know, I was at his announcement of his presidential candidacy. He asked me to do the invocation and just pray over proceedings. What a day that was when he launched the campaign. But many people do not realize that Herman first started out in terms of public life years ago as a singer, a gospel singer. He was an ordained minister and a preacher. And so he had a faith side that was amazing. And he kept that as his pillar of life all through his politics and everything that he did. So we want to honor him as a man who lived out his convictions, and I believe becomes a model for African American and other minorities, as well as all Americans, in terms of what a man should be, how he should stand strong. So I'm encouraged to have known him and have walked with him in some measure, and we thank God for him.
Yes, thank you both. You know, our deepest sympathies and sincerest prayers are with Herman's wife, Gloria, and with his children and grandchildren. Herman, may you rest in peace. Stay right there, and we'll be right back with more Black Voices for Trump Real Talk Online.
Antifa is destroying our communities, rioting, looting. Yet Joe Biden kneels down and his staff sends money for bail. And Biden fails to stand up to the radical leftists fighting to defund and abolish the police. With Biden kneeling to the left, we'd have chaos in the streets. President Trump is standing up for us, keeping our communities safe, protecting minority-owned businesses, and always standing for our flag.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Thanks to President Trump, criminal justice reform gave nonviolent offenders a second chance at life and the American dream.
He has given $100 million to HBCUs for scholarships and research.
And he has done all this for us in less than one term. Imagine what he can achieve with 4 more years.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to Black Voices for Trump Real Talk Online. I'm Katrina Pierson, back with Bishop Harry Jackson and the former Lieutenant Governor of Florida, Jennifer Carroll. Tonight, we'll be discussing the horrific violence and vandalism occurring in American communities while liberal Democrat leaders turn their backs on law enforcement. After weeks of demonizing law enforcement and calling to defund the police, it's no surprise that law enforcement in Milwaukee this week withdrew from the DNC convention. Bishop, do you think Democrats are playing a dangerous game here?
I do think they're playing a dangerous game. It's really all about the timeline, meaning they're hoping that they discredit the president before the election. Is all election bound. The longer they wait, though, the more likely there is to be some more explosive things that occur in the community that will actually backfire on them, make them look bad. So it's all about, since the impeachment process, going after the president, and now here we are at the pinnacle of that movement. And I think they've overplayed their hand, and many African Americans are concerned. We're not safe, and I believe that you can't play both ends against the middle. Either you're going to provide safety for the people, and you're going to give opportunity for change, or you're not going to be able to sustain safety, job security in an atmosphere of anarchy and chaos.
Yeah, I haven't heard it put that way. I like that. They're actually playing both ends against the middle, and it is very dangerous. And if you take a look at some of the videos that we see coming from the ground in cities like Portland and Chicago, it looks like a war zone. Specifically in Portland, where nightly attempts to storm and destroy the federal courthouse is a clear warning about what our nation, our entire nation, could look like in Joe Biden's America. But thankfully, we have a president in Donald J. Trump who stands for law and order. So Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this intentional disregard for law and order by liberal leaders?
Look at the overwhelming majority of American cities are run by Democrats. For decades and decades, they have gotten unsafer. Is that such a word? But these Democrat cities have gotten unsafe throughout the years. Now look at Chicago. There were more black people killed in Chicago during the President Obama-Biden presidency, 4,041, than at the height of the Iraqi-Afghanistan war of 2,500. Where was Biden to intervene or offer solutions to save Black lives? If Biden really cared about our urban sectors, where was he to offer these Black minority communities and his colleagues to entertain a more robust solution to help these communities? Now they're going to defund the police in these departments. Biden's silence in itself has actually encouraged and fueled a lot of the violence, as well as the congressional members who, in the recent House Judiciary Committee, when they refused to answer Attorney General Barr's question about, is it okay to burn down federal courthouses? None of these liberal congressional members would say that it's wrong. So to make things worse, the cost of cleaning up the damage that's done by these anarchists of our federal structures and the mobs that has torn up businesses is going to be incurred by the taxpayers. And the taxpayers are not realizing and understanding this. These anarchists are not only destroying taxpayer-funded structures, they're destroying slave abolitionists. They have torn down Frederick Douglass statues and the remembrance of those who have fought against slavery. It shows their ignorance of history. Where are the liberal leaders who claim to support Blacks? Where is Joe Biden to speak out against the destruction of the statues of Blacks, of those who fought against slavery? This silence by Biden and other liberal leaders should be a wake-up call to Black people. And I think that when leaders commit silence like Biden, they're giving a green light for even more violence. When Dr. King marched for civil rights, he marched peacefully. When he prayed peacefully. When he was incarcerated, he urged his followers to be peaceful. Dr. King would be ashamed of the silence that he's seeing with Joe Biden encouraging the destruction of Black business owners. Biden and his liberal colleagues have received millions of dollars from the George Soros and the liberal big pharma companies and other companies, and they're giving money to Black Lives Matter and these anarchist groups that are tearing up our cities, tearing up our statutes, making the war zone in these great communities. Instead of saying, let's take this money and put it towards these Black businesses that have been hurt, that they've lost their inventory, that they've put their whole life savings into their businesses to grow generational wealth for their family. Instead of doing that, they're funding a mob to be chaotic in our communities. That is not supporting Black lives at all.
No, it's not supporting Black lives. And you mentioned the tearing down of the statues, and whether it be Confederate soldiers or abolitionists, I mean, any destruction of our history is really destroying the legacy of those like Martin Luther King Jr. And so it's really sad that a lot of people are so uneducated to the point to where they just don't have a concept of the importance of preserving history. Not just that if we erase it, we're doomed to repeat it, but it essentially erases the fight that Black Americans have come through and really takes away of the legacy of those who got us here today. And to your point about Joe Biden's silence, I mean, his silence is consent, and it has truly emboldened the rioters. They began tearing down, founding fathers, Christopher Columbus, and as you mentioned, the abolitionists, but they've also now set their sights on the institutions of faith. Bishop, your church is right here in the DC area. How are you and your congregation dealing with this increasing hostility towards people of faith?
Well, it's a big deal because when Vice President Pence came for a listening session at church, we were very much concerned because Black Lives Matter people, representatives could show up and cause disruption. So we are having to kind of be under the radar. Churches can't operate. We have a certain number that we're dealing with, and we want to keep our people safe. As a shepherd, I want to do that. But my mayor invited folks 4th of July to come in, and they hope to have 1 million people come in our city. Now, as a result, the COVID incidents and infections have spiked up. And so they're wearing masks, they aren't doing social distancing. So the issue of keeping the people of God and the community safe and promoting due process with all these historic monuments, etc., we don't have an even-handed kind of application of the law. So I think it's hypocritical. And as I said earlier, it's all geared, I believe, toward the election and just see if they can stoke all this animosity and all these problems to a point where people turn violently anti-Trump.
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly about the election. I mean, there's no question about it. At this point, when you do look at you can gather and commit anarchy and burn down buildings, but you can't go to church. I mean, it's quite clear that this is all political. And, Jennifer, when we see, failure after failure with these Democrat mayors, they just refuse to protect their residents. And, we see now President Trump is trying to step in to protect the most vulnerable citizens that we have in these underserved communities as it is. What are some of the actions that you think are important that President Trump is taking now to help restore law and order in these communities?
Well, we should be grateful as a nation that we have President Trump to be the leader that he is. President Trump is standing with those residents who are crying out for help because the Democrat leadership in those liberal cities like Portland, Seattle, New York, they have failed the very people who's elected them to office. President Trump has taken several actions to restore law and order. He's put more federal enforcement on the ground, people who are specifically trained to handle things that will break out from the current violence when more violence is erupting, as we're seeing every night on the TV. Another thing he's doing is that he's putting these liberal politicians on notice who have embedded themselves and actually encouraged these rioters and Antifa mobs that's hijacking the Black Lives Matter movement, that President Trump has threatened them with certain sanctions, like withholding funding for certain programs, similar to that of the 60s, when governors in southern states wouldn't comply with several civil rights laws. Then President Johnson threatened to withhold highway funding, and that's a similar action that President Trump is doing. Another thing that President Trump has done is assured people that he's not going to stand for any more escalation of violence. And even this week, he's given the leaders of Portland and Seattle where the heart of most of this violence is occurring, an ultimatum that if they don't curtail violence, particularly between the citizens and destroying businesses, that because these businesses are vital to the economy, and that he will step in. These rioters and anarchists are destroying our beautiful cities and turning them, as we mentioned before, into war zones. Like every war, after the war, there comes a rebuilding process. Where do we go from here? And what is it going to look like in these cities after all of these anarchists and mobs and rioters go away? Lots of these businesses will never reopen again. Many of these Black families will have lost their dreams of building wealth and something that they can pass on to their heirs. But by the virtue of President Trump's strong stance to send in the National Guard where needed, to end chaos and tyrannical behavior, similar to that of President Lincoln, what he did in the South to save the Union, will assure law-abiding Americans that President Trump is standing with law and order to do things to protect their community, to protect their safety, and to protect this nation.
Yeah, thank God we have President Trump in the White House. I shudder to think of what our country would look like if this was allowed to metastasize to all of our communities. But to Jennifer's point, Bishop, the president was just recently endorsed by police organizations. One group specifically, the National Association of Police, who had previously endorsed Obama-Biden in 2008 and 12. Now they're supporting President Trump. Do you think we'll see more law enforcement organizations rally around the president now?
I think you certainly will, because there's an election orientation. The phrase "the law and order" years ago, for many Blacks, meant that there's going to be an anti-Black movement of oppression. That's how we thought about it back in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's not the case with President Trump. So what we're saying is keep our communities safe. Listen to this stat. June the 6th, I came across an article that had at that point 400 policemen injured. In Albany, New York, police was hit by a brick. We had in Atlanta, Maximilian Brewer struck by a vehicle recovering from surgery. Boston, Massachusetts, 7 folks. I just skipped through some of these events that I see. Columbia, South Carolina, 12 Columbia officers suffered various injuries. I could go down this list to all 400 in Jacksonville. A police officer's neck was slashed by a rioter, and he's in condition that we don't know about, unknown at this point. And LA, we have 27 police officers injured. So we can go on and on and on,
Wow.
and several deaths. So if I was a policeman, I would be going for President Trump, just saying somebody has got adult sense about how we're to keep our cities safe. Another thing is the emotional health of police. Deputy Chief Dion Boyd, 2 days ago in Chicago, committed suicide. The suicide of people that are in these pressured positions, that rate is going up. This man had only been promoted at July 15th. And so I believe that we're in a crisis that is on both sides of, if you want to call it, this riot protest issue. I believe, as was said earlier, the principles of nonviolence that came from King, they're not known, they're not studied, they're not understood. And so therefore, the very heart of what made Dr. Martin Luther King the champion of the underdog and the advancer of civil rights was that he did everything non-violently, and he kept his issue the issue. So we need to support the police, and we need to understand that nonviolence, or being the president being a law and order president, is not a dog whistle statement for
Right.
these black people. That's not what's happening.
Yeah, I always think about this concept of safety at home. Imagine that. People flee their lives in other countries and put everything on the line to come here so that they can be safe. And when you look at what's happening in the country today, and you mentioned the mental health of the police officers, imagine the mental health of their families, their wives, their children, who know that in some cities, the leaders are not standing behind them and supporting them. And it's truly disturbing. So thank God we have President Trump leading and backing our law enforcement. So thank you both for that insight. Let's take one more quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Black Voices for Trump, Real Talk Online.
We know you want to give Donald Trump 4 more years to fight for you in Washington, but he isn't just up against Joe Biden. He's up against the Democrat fundraising machine, and he needs all the help he can get. Don't just assume because his opponent hasn't completed a single sentence that this campaign is over. Crazy things happen, like this woman becoming Speaker of the House. Support the president today by texting Trump to 88022. Donald Trump is counting on every single one of his supporters to text Trump to 88022 now.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
People are really looking for something. I think you have to go out and really work hard.
You've sort of become like a folk hero.
There are no better builders than we have in New York, and a big percentage of that is black and minority folks, and I'm very proud of it.
I say to the African-American people that have to suffer, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it.
The black unemployment rate, the lowest in history.
1.3 million jobs, more than 1.3 million jobs added for African Americans. You talk about the First Step Act, thousands of people released from jail, 90% of them being African American.
And I want to thank our incredible president.
Funding for historically black colleges and universities. Opportunity zones, almost 9,000 of those in marginalized areas. This president has done more for African Americans in a matter of 2 to 3 years than any president in my lifetime.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to Black Voices for Trump, Real Talk Online. Joe Biden is leaving his basement, guys, to do a fundraiser with Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. Now, this is a city, according to ABC News, where multiple Atlanta police officers have resigned in recent weeks, which, obviously makes sense considering all the things that we've talked about, but she tightened the Atlanta Police Department's use of force rules following the deaths of George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks. So now Atlanta is seeing rising crime and police officers are feeling unsupported, and rightly so. Jennifer, this is just crazy, right? We have Democrat leaders who are choosing politics over public safety. What is going on here?
Well, it boggles the mind that the Democrats would see this chaos happening every day, see the increase of crime in our Black communities and other minority communities, not speak up against it, and they would choose to have a fundraiser and ignore the very situation that is impacting Black families across the country. This boggles the mind. This is like when the question was asked by Attorney General Barr if burning down the federal courthouses is okay with these Democrats, and throwing gasoline on a courthouse is not protesting. We're fine with peaceful protesting, but when we're saying the chaotic behavior that is putting graffiti on government buildings, and these liberal Democrats are not saying anything about it and just pushing their own political agenda to make this country more socialist. And folks don't understand the Marxist and socialist movement that is coming by the Democrats, that this is a way of taking away our Second Amendment, taking away our First Amendment, when we're silenced, that we can't even have a dialogue to disagree with someone. And the Democrats are fine with that. They're not demonstrating leadership at all. And when it comes to the Democrats supporting their radical base, the Nadler hearing this week was a signal to the radical base that rather than refusing to legislate solutions to benefit the things that are truly impacting our Black communities and minority communities, with the health crisis that's going on, with the economic crisis that's going on, They're basically choosing to fan the flames of anarchy to encourage the radical base. So we should not accept this as a norm for America. When they're calling for defunding the police, they're calling for defunding our communities, our safe communities. So therefore, when we're seeing politicians like Mayor Lance Bottom, and Joe Biden that just act as if it's another day in paradise and abdicate their responsibility for truly bringing about safety and security so people can go about their lives in accordance with what our founding fathers have created for this country, then they are not doing their just service to the people that elected them to office and those that Biden would like to elect him to office. So this is a wake-up call for people to see these are not the type of people we should be electing to office at all.
Well, yeah, you talk about defunding the police. I mean, you're right. It's defunding safety. It's defunding security. And clearly the term leadership, we have to use that word loosely here, but just to draw a contrast, when you have, the mayor of Atlanta, let's talk about, the governor of Georgia, Bishop, Governor Kemp called a state of emergency after the 4th of July holiday weekend because there were 5 people killed and 31 people injured. And one of those tragic deaths was an 8-year-old little girl. Why do Democrats keep, they're right, they're Democrats. Why do Democrats keep pushing these policies that they know will result in tragedy for our communities?
Well, I think they're in a state we learned in psychology called cognitive dissonance, meaning that what they espouse, they don't live. And what we're seeing with Biden on the campaign trail and what's going on in Georgia is classic posturing. The way I want to look at it is the politics of grievance. Over the last year, many African-American politicians have felt that their voice was supposed to be prophetic and they're to speak out against wrong. Now, the season of that prophetic cry for justice really is over. It's now time for performance, not prophecy, not words, but performance. So we don't have bills, we don't have follow-through action. It's really an issue. Let me give you an example or a way of looking at this. It's like being in a relationship with somebody, and ladies, is a little crass, so forgive me, but it's sort of like you have a boyfriend that shows up at your house at midnight, knocks on the door, and he wants what he wants, when he wants it. And then after he leaves, over the weeks, you don't get flowers, you don't get dates, you don't really have a relationship. And what happens on the Sunday before the Tuesday, we have Democrats show up at our Black churches, they show up in our community, they say, I love you, you know it, and then the follow through never happens. So what we're seeing in Georgia is a tug of war between rhetoric for safety and concrete measures of advancement. That's really what it's all about. So I think we're going to see a radical turn. I thank God that President Trump is a man of courage, and I've been with him enough times in his advisory role to see the compassion, to see the problem-solving orientation, to see the fact that he doesn't want people to suffer. And sometimes people who are strong are misunderstood, but he's got the willpower to carry through. And I think that's what we're dealing with. So the Democratic Party, which I left many years ago, my family was Democratic. We had generational Democrats. We believed that we needed to have freedom to vote. My dad was threatened at gunpoint by a Florida State trooper about voter registration. And so we've been involved generationally in the political process. But now it's time for men and women of action to come to the fore, and we've got to make a difference in this season.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful, and just listening to you speak just reminded me of so many things. The president not only has the courage and the compassion, but He has the policies. I mean, we have a president who has implemented actual policies that have impacted the Black community positively for generations to come. And when you think about Joe Biden and Obama, for that matter, who had 8 years with the first Black president to do something, anything for Black America, they did nothing. And then you have President Trump, who's demonized and criticized day in and day out, who's been working very hard and diligently to pass policies that actually benefit Black Americans, something the first Black president didn't even do. So it is quite eye-opening when you think about those facts, and the fact that the president has a record to run on is truly, captivating. And I hope many Black Americans are paying attention, because we see Joe Biden today, who seems to be capitulating to movements like Black Lives Matter to cover his own history of incredibly racist and divisive policies, along with some of the remarks that he's made. We don't have enough time in this show to go through all of them, because this actually began in 1972 to present. But Jennifer, what are some of the most egregious examples of Joe Biden's racism that the American public should be reminded of?
What they should be reminded of is his 1994 crime bill that incarcerated more Blacks under that bill, because Joe Biden, in his own words, says this bill would do everything but hang people for jaywalking. Now that speaks volumes, because the crack cocaine penalty created more Blacks to be incarcerated than non-Blacks under that crime bill. Joe Biden hugged and embraced the segregationists who he says were his mentors, the Mississippi Senator James Eastland and Herman Talmadge, that he said these are his mentors. These people fought against desegregation. Biden even said, oh, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. Well, you know what? You don't dictate to me what Blackness is. I've been Black all my life. You never even been there. Biden voted against charter schools, the one thing that we can get Black families a relief from having their kids stuck in failing schools. Joe Biden did not even want to have desegregation in schools, because he didn't want his, as so-called, he says, his children growing up in a racial jungle. So that is discussions and sentiments that he's had for years. Even to this day, when he is in a congregation with Black kids, he says, oh, when I went to the pool, all the Black kids will rub on my leg and have my blonde hair go down. What kind of talk is that for the Black kids?
Gross, yeah.
To be aspiring and inspiring to go to school and learn to be better than the parents who didn't get an education, or encourage them to expand their horizons to shoot for the moon. This is not the type of thing that we want in a president. This is not the type of pandering that we want from a man that claims to love Black lives. And even Kamala Harris, who was on the stage with him, bashed him for not supporting busing. And she even said, if I didn't have busing, I wouldn't have gotten to go to a quality school. So if this man has sentiments like this, that's been instilled in him as old as he is, those things are still there. It's not going anywhere. So the pandering to get the Black votes to get him in office so that they can have more secrecy in the government and utilize the government to harm people by weaponizing the agencies, to go after their enemies. This is a wrong type of leader that this country needs at this time. We need a leader like Donald Trump that will be a healer, that will be a unifier, that will be someone that's visionary to bring about the things that this country needs to have prosperity for all people, regardless of race, creed, or color.
Yeah, Joe Biden is the type of, leader that we don't need during any time period, considering, his, nearly 50-year history on the topic. I mean, when you refer to someone who's Black is clean and articulate, it makes you wonder what he thinks about the rest of us. So, but now he's putting on a great show, right, guys? I mean, he's out there with this, his talk and his kneeling and this woke performance. But is that going to work? Bishop, what are your thoughts on this Black Lives Matter organization and Joe Biden essentially giving them a free pass?
Well, I want to reemphasize something about Biden and go forward. The overcriminalization of the Black community really began with Biden's policies, commercialization, if you would, of prisons and that kind of thing, locking up people for everything but jaywalking And it's just an amazing thing that now he wants to be the liberator. As we talk about Black Lives Matter, I believe that there is a cry that is coming from the Black community to finally deal with certain issues, but we don't have leadership. The Black Lives Matter organization, as it stands, is an anti-Christian organization run by people that don't believe in the traditional family unit, that are socialistically oriented, and they want anarchy. And there are a lot of folks that are streaming along with them. But the average Black person in our urban communities simply wants to feel like they've got a free America and they've got equal opportunities. Now, I believe that the Trump agenda, if you would, is one that will give them opportunity. When you think about criminal justice reform, when you think about opportunity zones, when you think about other things that we'll share a little bit later, it's important that the movement is distinctive from the organization. And I think the organization, as a cancer survivor, I'll make a strong statement. I was given just a few years to live a while ago, and I've outlived all the prognostications, if you would, of the doctors. And I would say this: Black Lives Matter organization has a cancerous root that, if left alone, will begin to manifest more socialistic activities. The cry for let's fix the race problem now has legitimacy. And I believe that we have action-oriented policies, and we look at policies, not personalities. There's only one choice that African Americans should make, and that is to divide and break the control of the Democratic Party off of the backs of Black people, meaning let both parties vie for our vote, and that will never happen as long as we just kowtow and bow, yes sir, yes ma'am, to one party alone. So Black lives do matter in Chicago. Black lives matter on the weekends in any major city. Black lives matter when you're aborting Black babies. Black lives matter when somebody goes to prison and can't get out and reclaim their lives. Black lives matter in all kinds of ways, and we should be saying all Black lives matter, and we should make sure that there is an agenda and a policy that goes forth to make a permanent change, not just an emotional reaction.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Responding is very different than reacting. And so I think that point should be well taken. And you mentioned, voting as a block and forcing, both parties to really compete for it is really what's been lost, and why, Democrats have been able to essentially run these communities into the ground. And, many people like myself who managed to get out, are doing everything we can to try and help others get out. And we're just met by these roadblocks, one after another, by these liberal policies. And as soon as they shout racism, everybody just shuts down. So maybe now people will pay attention, because I could not imagine for 1 second any Black person voting for Joe Biden. I mean, this is a guy that it just recently came out that he used the N-word 13 times on the Senate floor. And even if they made the argument that in one of these cases he was quoting from something 13 times, you have to be awfully comfortable with the word to say it 13 times. And I just don't buy it. I wouldn't even be comfortable saying it 13 times. But clearly Joe Biden, hey, I'm not Black, apparently, according to Joe Biden. So I'd like to get your final thoughts. But before I do, I want to give our audience several ways to get involved, because the election is just a few months away, and there's still so much more you can do from home to help President Trump get reelected this November. First, download the official Trump 2020 campaign app. It is available on Apple and Android, and you can use the app to register for online events, host meetups, and become a volunteer. You can even earn exclusive prizes. If you or your friends or family or neighbors Want to get involved to help fight to re-elect President Trump? Sign up at armyfortrump.com. To stay in touch with the Trump campaign, text Trump to 88022, and to get involved with the Black Voices for Trump Coalition, text WOKE to 88022. Now, if you enjoyed tonight's show, please like and share this broadcast, and we will now get to final thoughts. Jennifer, what would you like to leave for Black voters who are still on the fence about voting for President Trump?
Well, our government has forgotten that we are still free citizens of the United States. I served in the Navy for 20 years, even during the Gulf War, because I believe that our freedom is a birthright that we must defend every day. Donald Trump is a fence that they're standing on top of that protects them from tyrannical government. In my opinion, if everyone is sitting on a fence right now, if they can't see firsthand what is happening in this country, which is a prelude in Seattle and Portland, and they still haven't decided, then I would say prepare yourself to become a victim. If you're on the fence right now, Donald Trump is the only thing standing between tyranny and prosperity. What more would it take? Or even not even the Civil War began this badly. They didn't even tear down Jesus Christ and burn churches during the Civil War. But this group of radical leftists, that's like a bunch of piranha, they destroy and eat anything that falls in the water. We should not allow that to be normalized in our country. And those sitting on the fence watching this play out day in and day out, they need a wake-up call that the only person to defend us and protect us is going to be Donald Trump. These fence sitters should also worry about our country's economy. The stage that our country is in right now will take somebody who knows about business and creating jobs like Donald Trump to get our country out of the hole that we're in. Biden has never created a job. He's lived off of government all of his life. There's nothing Biden brings to the table to help our country. He's had a chance for over 30 plus years. So therefore, we should know that if he hasn't demonstrated anything in the past in creating jobs and creating a better economy and creating a better America, what is he going to do in the next 4 to 8 years? He's already had his time. He's had his chance. Being in the Senate, being in the Congress was a place to create opportunities of legislation to bring about a better America. When he was vice president, he had his chance with President Obama to bring about solutions to help Obama make it a better America. He didn't do that. So he's already demonstrated he's a failure. President Trump, in 4 short years, have demonstrated the successes that he brings about for every American who wants to capitalize on the American dream and capitalize on the opportunities that he has put forward. Donald Trump is the man that can take us out of the conditions that we're in and bring about prosperity to Americans all over again.
That's a great point, Jennifer. What does Joe Biden bring to the table, considering he's still complaining about all the issues he's been complaining about for years, even after being in a position to fix that? So that's an excellent point. Bishop, what are your final thoughts this evening?
I believe that we have to, as Black people, recognize that by and large, this election will come down to minority vote. And I've written a book called A Manifesto. The subtitle is Christian America's Contract with Minorities. I believe that the Trump agenda will take us forward and empower us. Let's just think about educational reform. The idea that charter schools are things that should be funded that will give you an opportunity to get education not based on your zip code, but based on your academic potential. That's really powerful. We also have public policies that we can follow up on, like criminal justice reform, First Step Act that the president just really pushed through. It's amazing how well he did. I think about right now that we're dealing with police reform, that the president had an executive order, one of the best things I've seen in terms of substance. He's listened to Black people, so he's made a difference. Wealth creation is another issue that we got to deal with. 42% of Blacks own homes in America versus 76% of whites. 46% of Hispanics versus 76% of whites. So if we don't have home ownership, we pass on only thousands of dollars to the next generation. If we own homes, then we can pass on 156,000 or more dollars to generational wealth. That's going on right now. HUD is working on trying to work through in the opportunity zone creation, housing that would allow people to have access to their jobs, to raise up different communities. I could go on and on and on. I'm just going to summarize by saying the following. President Trump is action-oriented. He is a visionary, action-oriented, change-oriented person who deep in his heart has great compassion for our community. Do not choose the boyfriend that keeps promising that he's going to marry you someday, but never follows through. You need to get married, Black America, to the one who is going to change your life, raise your status, and put you on a house on a hill and make everything different from now on. So I'm voting for Trump. It's going to take courage. If you could get 2 or 3 friends to just work with you and talk to people that you think are open, we can shift this thing. 5 to 7% of the Black vote takes 5 to 7% away from the Democrats and multiplies the impact of African Americans and other minorities. Let's make a difference. Let's make a change. Let's shake America in a positive way. It's time. So I'm going to quote the old civil rights adage, keep hope alive. We're going to keep hope alive by making a difference. I'm voting for Trump. How about you?